Take a look at what's making headlines in the international newspapers. Solange Merjean joins us for that. Solange, you're going to start off with the withdrawal of troops from Bagram, their main air base in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and already since the withdrawal on Friday, the Taliban is already advancing and moving ahead. As Al-Quds Al-Arabi puts it, quote, the Taliban has taken control of the strategic Panjwai district of Kandahar. This has sent, the paper says, hundreds of Afghan forces fleeing, and it could mean, the Pan-Arabic paper says, a return to life, what life was like 20 years ago. Now, the New York Times tells us that such fears, they are very much on the minds of Kabul residents who are, quote, slipping into shock, even if on the surface, for now, little has changed in the city. The paper notes that the government is quite increasingly isolating itself in the Afghan capital with rampant mismanagement, government forces surrendering, often without a fight for lack of ammunition, and above all, it says, still no concrete plan for leading Afghanistan into the future without the help of U.S. security forces.
A lot of papers, Solange, looking at what lessons may or may not have been learned over the last 2 decades.
Yeah, The Guardian argues in an analysis piece that for Americans, Afghanistan was never meant to be another Vietnam, but it turned out to be one because the Defense Department never learned the lessons from that war, from the Vietnam War, that fighting a counterinsurgency thousands of miles from home leads American forces to be considered the occupiers. Now, with the withdrawal from Bagram, the paper argues that many have been left with a sort of sense of betrayal. It says that the U.S. cannot escape responsibility for that, even if U.S. troops are soon to no longer be in Afghanistan.
Okay. Let's move across to France, actually. Papers here, a lot of focus on the far right's Marine Le Pen. She was re-elected as leader of her Rassemblement National, or National Rally Party.
Yeah, despite her party's dismal showing in the last regional elections, well, Politico Europe tells us that Le Pen is still by far the far right's lady, their favorite candidate and favorite politician in France. After being re-elected this weekend with 98.5% of her party's votes, Politico says that Le Pen is, quote unquote, staying the course, and that, as Mediapart tells us, this is exactly what Le Pen told her followers she plans to do, i.e. stay the course. But the site says that her plan to rechristen her party as a more mainstream one is nonetheless creating some infighting and internal strife within the far-right party, with some saying that she's caving to the less extreme, the right in general. Now, infighting aside, the Belgian paper Le Soir laments that the French far-right is being normalized, that its populism is still being picked up by a part of the French population that feels abandoned, and only helping those groups of people, of individuals, can really have an effect, according to Le Soir, on squashing France's far-right tendencies.
Gosh, and also making headlines here in France is the slow-in vaccine drive here.
Yeah, as debate still rages on over whether the vaccines should be, the debate rages on about whether the vaccines should be mandatory for health workers. Le Parisien says some politicians actually want to make the jabs a requirement for everyone. But the paper explains that the government feels that such a move would be risky and potentially create a backlash. So far, the government has said they're not going to do either thing, as there could be issues of personal freedoms at play, and also, quote, a risk of a heated and even violent pushback. But in other countries like Italy, it's already made the move. Le Parisien tells us that Italian healthcare workers, well, they are now obliged to get vaccinated, or else they could potentially be suspended without pay or moved to sort of desk jobs. This move, the Parisien tells us, that the Italian population is actually quite in favor of, even if some 300 healthcare workers have said that they are going to contest the government's decision in the courts.
Tricky one. Moving on to some sports news, Solange, and the question of whether or not the Olympics is racist.
Yeah, with the Olympics less than 3 weeks away, the Huffington Post takes a look at whether or not the Games are racist towards black women in particular. Now, this question comes after the case of Sha'Carri Richardson. Her case went viral. She's an African-American runner who was suspended for 30 days because of marijuana use that came up in her tests, which means that she's going to miss her major race. Anyway, this created much outrage in the press, adding to her case. There are others as well. 2 other black women, they had to be withdrawn because of high testosterone levels. So the site says that even if the races are yet to begin, there is so far very little grace for black women in the 2021 Olympics. And that includes swimmers as well. The Washington Post tells us that the International Swimming Federation has banned a swim cap that is helpful for natural afro hair because, quote, it doesn't fit the natural form of the head, end quote. Yeah, exactly. What? Well, for the paper, though, this is bunk. And it calls the ruling a slap in the face, that there is no special advantage to these caps. On the contrary, they create drag.
Exactly.
And it says, the Washington Post says that this ruling just continues in a tradition of aquatic apartheid of the past.
Very strange decision. You wonder why you go out of your way to make that.
Exactly.
Finally, Solange, you have spotted another article about another accessory that has people shaking their heads.
Yeah, over the past weekend, there's a lot of news has been gone viral about Ukrainian women having to march in high heels. You see them there. And as The Guardian tells us, such a move, it's important to note, this is not a tradition in Ukraine, but potentially the sign of latent sexism and misogyny among the ranks. It's not an old thing they've been doing. And so this has gone viral abroad, and even Ukrainian politicians have dug their heels in and are asking for an investigation.
Because even their combats there look quite tightly fitted. All very strange. All very strange, Solange, but thanks a lot for that look at the international papers. Okay, that wraps it up for this edition. Do take care.